Marrok is currently the most talked about character in all of the Ahsoka series, and likely for very good reason. As the very last Inquisitor in existence by the era of 9 ABY, Marrok is all that is left of their previous order, and he is paving his own path to glory. A mystery surrounds him, and we have yet to know exactly who he is or where he came from. But what we do know is that Marrok is not only the last of the Inquisitors, but perhaps the most unique of all of them. He may dress the part and wield their standard issue double-bladed lightsaber, but now Marrok has literally made a name for himself. One of the strangest and unnoticed aspects of Marrok as a character is, unlike most of the other Inquisitors, Marrok has actually foregone his title and goes instead by his name, or at least the name that he has chosen. Where most Inquisitors will refer to themselves and each other by their numbered brother or sister rank, Marrok does not do this. This not only increases the intrigue around him, but it hides his true strength, as we do not know his rank within the Inquisitorius or what it was. But this is exactly what we wanted to talk about today. Just by analyzing his brief duel with Ahsoka Tano, we can firmly say that he acts and fights completely differently from any other Inquisitor heretofore. So my friends and Acolyte, join us today as we open up another holocron and highlight the differences and significance between the Inquisitorius at large and Marrok. But before we do, we have had a terrible vision through the Force. Many of you visiting our archives today have not yet subscribed to the Order, so if you've been enjoying the Star Wars content and want to be enlightened, reach out and crush the subscribe button. It is your destiny. We have foreseen it. The typical style of an Inquisitor can be summed up to surround, intimidate, and overwhelm. Like wolves, the Inquisitors often hunt in packs, with lesser Inquisitors usually traveling in large numbers, and the higher ranked Inquisitors either traveling in pairs or solo. This allows them to more easily surround and intimidate their prey. Once engaging with their quarry, the Inquisitors will move into a hyper-aggressive fighting style meant to intimidate and overwhelm their Jedi prey right at the very beginning. This was an effective way of decimating through many fearful Jedi of the era. Most Jedi fighting styles are defensive, and in the case of the Jedi who survived the Clone Wars, they would often be less familiar with actual saber-to-saber foes. Not to mention, they were clouded by fear, and therefore unable to react appropriately. This is why most Padawans and lesser knights were easily cut down by the overly aggressive style of the Inquisitors, who would rather batter down their defenses at the start, and the helpless Jedi often wouldn't know how to recover in enough time in order to mount a proper defense or a counterattack. This was the main MO for the Inquisitorius, and as a result, most of them specialized in the 7th form of lightsaber combat known as Juya. Form 7 can be pinned down when analyzing how the practitioners move. Juya is volatile, explosive, and seemingly completely random. They move as if they are like a live wire, sparking with electricity. Form 7 has often been described as being like a roaring river, a rush of apparently random and unconnected strikes that still flow together seamlessly. For an example of what this is supposed to look like when perfected, we can look at Sidious or Maul. Sidious was a primary wielder of Form 7, but he knew all forms of lightsaber combat and was a master of each one of them. Maul was one who made Juya his main study, and we can see the similarities between their fighting styles and the styles of the Inquisitors. Now, obviously, there is a definitive skill gap between the Inquisitors and Maul, but they still use the same form at least most of the time. The only outliers to this are apparently the Grand Inquisitor, whose primary form was that of Makashi, and Marrok, whose style we'll get into in just a moment. But again, only 2 Inquisitors break from the path of Form 7. The 2 most powerful and most skilled. The accessory to this extremely aggressive fighting style when made complete when paired with the spinning double-bladed lightsabers that the Inquisitors wield. While most see these lightsabers as a gimmick, this is actually kind of the point. They aren't super practical when against experienced opponents, but they're not meant to be. The spinning mechanic is an intimidation tool, as well as a bit of a crutch for the lesser powered Inquisitors. Darth Sidious was a fan of this method, and saw and used this in the Clone Wars with the monstrosity General Grievous, and the effect that he had on the Jedi. The Inquisitors' tactics heavily echoed those of Grievous's, specifically the intimidation aspect. A scared Jedi is a weak Jedi, as they aren't able to focus on the Force if they're afraid. This leaves them completely vulnerable, and just as they were vulnerable to Grievous, so too are they now to the Inquisitors. This was how Grievous was able to hunt and kill so many Jedi, which was by overwhelming them with all of his tactics and multiple arms. The spinning that Grievous did may not have been super useful in actual combat, but it was meant to be a setup. His showmanship was all for intimidation, and Sidious took note of this, realizing the massive advantage that it granted Grievous, someone that did not use the Force. By employing this same mechanical spin in the Inquisitors' lightsabers, Sidious designed them to be perfect for inducing fear, and then he mass-produced them and made them standard issue for all of his new Jedi hunters, the Inquisitors. They surround, intimidate, and overwhelm. This can be seen multiple times, especially in the Kenobi series, when the Grand Inquisitor, fifth brother, and Reva, the third sister, arrive on Tatooine to find the Jedi hiding within the saloon. They surround the area to cut off exits, intimidate the locals, and flush out the Jedi, and then Reva attempts to immediately cut him down. On the subject of Reva though, she exemplifies the weakness of this strategy. Whenever she enters into a duel with another experienced opponent, she just buckles. Despite her rank being that of the third sister, it's almost pathetic how outclassed she is by everyone around her. But what we come to realize is this problem is not exclusive with Reva, but rather an issue that plagues all of the Inquisitors, especially the lesser of the group. It seems that Marrok, the second sister, and the Grand Inquisitor are the only ones who are exempt from this problem, but that is apparently because of their intelligence and the fact that they know how to properly employ their own styles rather than relying on this one-trick strategy as established by Sidious. But this is actually not entirely the Inquisitors' fault. The Inquisitors were trained under Vader, who needed to completely break them from their Jedi mindset. Since most of the Inquisitors were Jedi, they all fought like Jedi, which was far too defensive. To Vader, this was unacceptable, and he trained them to fight with almost exclusively offense. In fact, if he detected they were using too many defensive moves and were not counterattacking properly, he would take something from them, either a limb or a body part. This was to teach them pain for which to draw on the dark side. This is why we see Inquisitors on constant attack. They seem to just crumble and retreat when their enemy fights back properly. This is what Vader trained into them. Like we said earlier, it appears that only the Grand Inquisitor, second sister, and Marrok were able to break free of this mold and become better for it. This was because they had proven themselves enough to Vader to be allowed to use their preferred forms. And now, we must highlight the differences in Marrok's form. By studying his fight with Ahsoka, we can firmly say that he is an excellent duelist, just not fit to fight someone on the caliber of Ahsoka Tano. We can see him using classic Inquisitor strategy at the beginning of the duel, as he tries to surround and overwhelm her, doing so by fighting alongside an HK droid. But Ahsoka, someone far too familiar with these cheap strategies, completely dismantles this initial approach, quite literally, doing so by taking apart the droid in a matter of a few moves. Marrok fights well in tandem with the droid, and might have been successful against anybody else, but when it comes down to it, and him and Ahsoka, we can really see where his own style comes into play. Multiple times, Marrok attempts to get aggressive with Ahsoka, coming at her with many heavy strikes, particularly the strong overhand blows. This specific attack pattern is called the Falling Avalanche Strikes, and it belongs to Form 5, specifically the duelist form Jem So. Unfortunately for Marrok, Ahsoka is an expert in Form 5, having been trained by Anakin Skywalker, although Ahsoka prefers the Shien style. As a little reminder, Form 5 was split into two parts. Originally it was Shien, a form that was created by Cerriso wielders who desired to have more offense and options in combat. Shien is mostly defensive, but with a good amount of offensive capability, relying on smooth counterattacks. It is mostly designed for blast deflection, and only skilled practitioners can make good use of it in saber-to-saber combat. Jem So is the variant which is tooled towards dueling, and what Anakin Skywalker perfected. It is characterized by almost completely foregoing defense entirely in favor of beating opponents' defenses down early and breaking them through brute power. The only kind of defense we see in Jem So is mainly quick parries and counter strikes. It is strong when it comes into contact with someone who can't meet the strength of a Jem So wielder, and by doing so, it gains momentum in combat extremely efficiently, becoming even stronger as the fight goes on. But again, Ahsoka knows all of this, which is why she actually meets Marrok with the exact same strength and neutralizes any momentum that he attempts to gain against her. We can see a couple of specific times when Ahsoka cancels his attacks and staggers him out of gaining any proper flow. But this is not the end, and this is not the only form that Marrok uses. When he opens up his second blade and switches to the saber staff mode, or in this case, it's technically a double-bladed lightsaber, he switches his style from 5 gems so to 7 Juya. Notice how many behind the back strikes he does, or how he quickly goes from high to low in strike patterns. It's erratic, explosive, very much akin to how Darth Maul fought. It is again unfortunate for him that Ahsoka has also fought Maul and several Inquisitors, meaning that she knows the ins and outs of moving around Juyo's wild sequences and keeping her opponent off balance. Not one for overconfidence though, Marrok clearly sees he's outmatched and does the smart thing by fleeing. And this is Marrok's style, which is far superior to those of the Inquisitors. One thing that is also helping him is that he does appear to be quite powerful, or at least he is far stronger than all the other former companions. With his backstory yet to be revealed, and Sam Witwer's involvement in the show, many are speculating that he could possibly have been a Starkiller tie-in. This is especially intriguing since Marrok's style closely resembles that of Starkiller's in how aggressive and deadly it is. Not to mention that Starkiller's form also changes from Xi'an to Gem So. Of course, it's unlikely that he actually is Starkiller, as his power isn't nearly where he needs to be for that. However, it's possible that Marrok is inspired by Galen Merrick, as even their names are similar. Though we have discovered that Marrok is actually named after Sir Marrok of Arthurian legend, and not after Merrick. Not to mention one thing that does separate Marrok's style from Starkiller's is that Starkiller uses a lot of force attacks in his saber combat, indicative of techniques from Form 6 Nyman. If Marrok does do that though, we have yet to see. But anyway, my friends, these are our thoughts and speculations about Marrok, and why how he fights is incredibly different and more deadly than the common Inquisitor. In fact, although it's too early to say now, but Marrok may be the greatest duelist the Inquisitorius has ever seen. But what are your thoughts on this and our analysis on his lightsaber form? What are your thoughts on his ability to change his form and why he ultimately decided to do so against Ahsoka Tano? As always, my friends, thank you again for visiting our archives. It means the world to us, and we hope to see you again soon. May the Force be with you.